Okay, so thank you everyone for joining our workshop today. I will be presenting a case study from the Berry Brook Watershed in Dover, New Hampshire, getting to 10%. First, I would like to go through a few important definitions with you just to get us started. Most of you are familiar with the definition of stormwater, which is water resulting from precipitations, including rain and snow, that runs off the land surface. Stormwater best management practices, or BMPs, are structural, vegetative, or managerial practices used to treat, prevent, or reduce water pollution. BMPs can be both gray or green infrastructure. Gray could be such as a settling pond, and green could be a rain garden or bioretention system. So BMPs is sort of an overarching term for any management of stormwater. Low impact development, or LIDS, is an innovative approach to land development that mimics the natural movement of water pre-development in order to manage stormwater. LIDS uses design strategies and landscape features that filters, infiltrates, stores, evaporates, and detains water as close to the source as possible. So examples includes bioretention systems, grass swales, constructed wetlands, green roofs, rain gardens, porous asphalt, downspout disconnection using rain barrels and sand filters, etc. So stormwater BMPs and LIDS are basically the same thing. There's just a higher level of qualities that needs to be met in order for a system to be a low impact development project. So I guess all LIDS are BMPs, but not all BMPs are LIDS. Impervious cover, it's pretty straightforward, is a structure or land surface with a low capacity for infiltration, included but not limited to pavement, roof, roadways, and compacted soils. Disconnected impervious cover is impervious cover that does not contribute directly to stormwater runoff from a site, but directs runoff to an on-site pervious cover to infiltrate into the soil or be filtered so that the net rate and volume of runoff is not greater than the runoff from an undisturbed cover of equal area. This is what we, or a lot of people already know as net zero runoff. So net zero runoff and disconnected impervious cover is the same thing. Effective impervious cover is the total impervious surface areas less the area of disconnected impervious cover. So a net zero runoff site is not counted in the effective impervious cover. The total impervious cover is just simply all impervious surfaces in your watershed without looking at stormwater management systems. So the goal is to increase the disconnection of stormwater to reduce the effective impervious cover in your watershed. So that's the goal. The higher your disconnection rate, the lower your effective impervious cover. So that's kind of setting the groundwork for this presentation. So the impact of impervious cover in a watershed is greater as the percentage of impervious cover increases. There is a predictive model that demonstrates how a stream's water quality and habitat quality would respond to the amount of impervious cover, or the percentage of urbanization in a watershed. So it is safe to assume that a stream's quality would degrade more and more as its impervious cover increases. The targets for a healthy aquatic ecosystem is in the range of 10 to 15%, and it starts to degrade at the 20 to 25% range. After that, the quality of habitat continues to degrade and does not support aquatic life. Now we've done the groundwork, and now we can take a tour of the Berry Brook Watershed in New Hampshire. So a little bit of background. The Berry Brook Watershed is a small urbanized watershed developed with commercial and residential sectors. The watershed is approximately 185 acres and has over 30% of effective impervious cover. Remember what we said, that the goal is 10 to 15%. This watershed was heavily urbanized. It was 30% impervious cover. The development of the landscape has changed the delineation of the watershed. Its headwaters is now a shopping mall parking lot. What used to be a wetland was filled, and a big shopping center was built in its place. So that became the new headwaters. In 2006, the Berry Brook was deemed impaired by the United States EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. As a result of a study, the Berry Brook was added to the EPA's 303D list of impaired waters under the Clean Water Act by the New Hampshire's Department of Environmental Services. Due to a lack of aquatic life support, and stormwater runoff was identified as one of the sources for this aquatic life impairment. So the water chemistry did not meet the guidelines for aquatic life. Macroinvertebrate communities disappeared. Water temperatures increased, and the fish also disappeared. The city of Dover became legally liable for the degradation of the water quality of this brook and faced financial repercussions and fines if no watershed management plan was put into action. And this is the big difference between the United States regulations and the Canadian ones. So we here in Canada try to get more regulation and enforcement, whereas in the United States, this actually does happen, where the Clean Water Act does actually protect and enforce clean water regulations. So the city of Dover had a financial stake in the restoration of this brook. They did not need to pay these fines if an action plan was put into place. So the Berry Brook Watershed Renewal Project, the City of Dover formed a partnership with the University of New Hampshire's Stormwater Center to help study and restore the watershed. There were funding applications that were submitted by the university and matching funds from the City of Dover to put into place various green infrastructure projects, and the municipality took the responsibility for the construction and the long-term maintenance of these systems. Over a 10-year period, 25 stormwater treatment systems, or as they call them, low-impact development projects, were built at strategic locations around the watershed. And we will see these projects in the next slide, but I have a few examples there: subsurface gravel wetlands, subsurface gravel filters, bioretention systems, vegetated swales, rain garden, and much more. But the main goal of this project is to reduce the effective impervious cover from 30% down to 10%. The university is responsible to conduct the long-term monitoring of the water quality by sampling, fish population, they use electrofishing surveys as well, and macroinvertebrates using a kick netting protocol. So the map here you can see is the delineation of the Berry Brook watershed, and up here you can see, I think you can see my mouse. This is the shopping center, the shopping mall. So the parking lot, the rooftops of all these businesses is literally the headwaters of the watershed. And then every little dot you see here is a stormwater management project. There is a 26th point right here, and I could not find any references to it. So all of the resources say 25 low impact development projects over 10 years. So we'll stick with that. The first project in our tour is the subsurface gravel wetland. And that captures the runoff from this shopping center. It is stop number 1. There was a natural wetland here, but there was also a lot of dumped trash. The site was cleaned up, that was step 1. And then an underground structure of sand and gravel, some underground drainage pipes were also installed there. The vegetation was reinstalled and additional trees and shrubs were planted. They also created a walking trail through the area for pedestrians living in nearby residential areas to be able to walk through, because this made a nice little natural area for them to walk through. And when we were there that morning, we actually saw 3 deers, which was great. So there is a connection to some forested areas through this area. Because of this project, a new acre of wetland was gained. So because just the fact that they cleaned up the trash and they cleared any kind of restriction, the wetland itself expanded and gained naturally new ground. This system is a high-performing stormwater treatment system that also works well during the winter. We will see in the next slides how underground structures treat stormwater. This project requires very little maintenance. Every 2 to 3 years, they recommend either mowing or bush cutting the cattails on the surface. That won't harm the roots or the rhizomes. The plants will regrow in the next spring, but the purpose of mowing and removing the dead vegetation, so think of it in the fall when the plants have dried up. If you can cut all that and take it away and prevent the decomposition of these plants in the system. The thing is that these plants have been absorbing nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen over the 2 or 3 year period. And if you allow them to decompose, they're just going to release all these nutrients that they've already stored back into the system and back into the water. So that defeats the purpose of the nutrient removal. Good thing is that they actually compost these plants, and that makes nutrient-rich compost. So the next slide, I'm going to explain one of the core concepts that we're going to be talking about during this presentation. So the design for all or most of the systems that we're going to see today is that sand and gravel structure or mixture that goes on underground. And they call this the bioretention soil mix, or BSM. The soil mix becomes a habitat for beneficial bacteria to grow. When the underground substrate, so that sand and gravel, remains saturated with water, it creates an anaerobic environment. So that's an environment without oxygen. That environment, it helps to breed a type of bacteria called denitrifying bacteria. And these bacteria are able to transform dissolved inorganic nitrogen into a form of nitrogen that can be used by the plants. These bacteria are also capable of degrading petroleum hydrocarbons or oil products. The bioretention system, the soil mix of sand and gravel, it's going to be seen throughout this entire presentation. Now, I would need a refresher course on the whole nitrogen cycle to better understand the process that goes on in here, but it was explained very well by our tour guide, and there are some great resources on the website, on the university's website, that explains this in detail. I won't attempt to explain it in more details than that. So for every system, there are these charts that demonstrate the performance of the different systems. So I'm not going to show the charts for each and every system. This is just an example. So these charts is what proves or is what provides the data of how these systems actually work and how they perform in different times of the year. So here we have levels of total suspended solids. TPHD, that is the total petroleum hydrocarbons diesel range. DIN is the dissolved inorganic nitrogen, zinc, and total phosphorus. This is the chart that we see for each and every system. So these are the parameters that they look at in details, and there are a lot of these charts available on the website. Some of these systems will also have these other charts that shows the seasonal performance. So in the summer and in the winter, which is the blue. So we do see a little bit of a decrease in dissolved inorganic nitrogen and total phosphorus in the winter, but in general, the system keeps performing throughout the seasons, which is very impressive. The next project, as we kept walking down the trail, is a bioretention system that is at a historic pumping station. It's called the Waterworks. It was built in 1888. It's the same concept as the subsurface gravel wetland. So there is that underground storage space with sand and gravel for that microbiome proliferation, that performance for water treatment. And it's just on a smaller scale than the gravel wetland. So the other one takes a lot more space, and this one is good for retrofitting around existing development. So same concept, smaller scale. Right next to that same building, the historic pumping station, they installed a second system. And this bioretention system is basically the same thing, except that the surface is planted with grass. As with most systems that we're going to see in this presentation, they are all designed for the 25mm rain event or the 1-inch rain event. They chose to focus on water treatment of the everyday storm rather than size it for the 1 in 10 year or 1 in 100 year storm. However, they have found that these systems do maintain their efficiency for pollutant removal even during rain events that are greater than that 25mm of rain. So even if they were designed for a certain volume of water, they've noticed that the performance can remain the same even if they have significantly higher volumes of water entering the system. So like the others, made with sand and gravel structures, but covered with lawn instead of cattails. So the maintenance is simply mowing, which is done by Dover's Public Works during their regular maintenance schedule. This system also performs well in cold climates, and it requires a relatively small area. This is just another photo of a few photos of the construction of this bioretention system and another photo of it during a rain event. Now, before you ask, why not use plants and cattails in all bioretention systems? Well, one reason is that they wanted to study the difference between grass-seeded bioretention systems and planted bioretention systems with plants such as cattails. The results actually indicate that the grass bioretention systems actually perform better in certain circumstances than the other. The green is the grass and the blue is the planted bioretention system, such as the gravel wetland. But this is only true for these bioretention systems where the soil is made up of that same sand and gravel structure. It is not the same when we are talking about lawns, like regular lawns on compacted soil. This does not negate the science on rain gardens using plants with the long roots that creates the pores in the ground to into compacted ground to encourage the infiltration or the absorption of nutrients or to help pollinators and wildlife. It does not negate the whole science on rain gardens. Absolutely not. This is just that bioretention soil mix, that sand and gravel structure. That is the performing system that is underground. All they did is compare grass versus plants, and they saw that these two systems actually perform about the same. Now, believe me, it took me some time to accept this notion because it had to be re-explained to me a few times by our tour guide, whose name is Dr. Thomas Ballestero. He's the director of the Stormwater Center. I was a little upset when he was talking about grass being just as efficient as plants. So he had to explain it a few times to me before I started to accept these notions, and he showed me some data, and it's true. It's true. So that's what their science is revealing. But anyway, moving on. The next stop was a subsurface gravel filter that has been installed in storm drains to capture runoff from the roads. They are made with the same mix of sand and gravel and have shown to be effective in removing total suspended solids, petroleum hydrocarbons, and zinc. They are not as effective for phosphorus and nitrogen compared to vegetated filter systems. They need to be maintained every 4 months or so by a vacuum truck that cleans out the sediment that has built up. So that has also been added to the regular maintenance of schedule of the City of Dover's maintenance crews. There is a school on Horn Street that the university created a partnership with to install 1 rain garden, 1 bioswale, and 1 bioretention system that we will see in the next slide. You can't see it in this photo, but in the center of the rain garden, there is an overflow pipe, one of those dome grates that they use everywhere. And there is also overflow pipes installed in the bioswale. So they did put some engineering efforts into the construction of these systems. These systems are relatively low maintenance, other than maybe some weeding and some replanting, and they require very small areas. This bioretention system is also designed for the 25mm rain event. It is pretty much exactly the same as the one to the pumping station that we just saw. Except that this one is equipped with automatic samplers that study the performance of this system. So it'll collect real-time data on the peak flow of water going into the system and all kinds of different parameters that they measure. So this one was designed to be a study site. So like I said, the points here, the slide is basically the same as the pumping station, just at the school, which is a great education piece for the school, and the school was very excited to be a part of this project. Also near the school, there is a tree box filter. The tree box filter is a concrete vault that is filled with the same bioretention mix. They might have added a little bit more compost, and it is planted with a native tree that is connected to a storm drain. The vault is open bottomed so that the water can infiltrate into the soil. The soil mix is 80% sand and 20% compost. It's designed for maximum permeability with the minimum organic content needed to sustain the tree. In the filter, they call it the media filter, the water treatment of pollutants is done by the tree and the microorganisms. The chart demonstrates the system's performance in removing the total suspended solids, total petroleum hydrocarbons, dissolved or inorganic nitrogen, and phosphorus and zinc. Surprisingly, this chart here shows that the total phosphorus, there was actually no removal. So I was trying to find another chart to see if it was just no data or if the tree actually didn't want the phosphorus. I'm not sure. So we'll have to do some more research to see if that tree is removing total phosphorus or not. These tree boxes can be used along sidewalks and parking lots and integrated into street landscapes. It's a choice that transforms isolated street trees into stormwater filtration devices. They have very low maintenance. The maintenance is basically removing the trash that can accumulate in the grate and perhaps trimming the branches. And like any tree, it helps reduce urban heat islands by creating shade and, of course, benefits biodiversity. Now, the Grove Street Project. There is no actual name for this system except for a made-up name that they made up. I think the engineer his last name is Boulanger, and they call this the Boulanginator. I don't know. They will just refer to it as the Grove Street Project. It's an innovation because this project was developed to be a subsurface gravel filter underneath this residential road. So the city of Dover lacks the equipment to maintain a porous asphalt system, which we will see further down. So they developed a system that mimics the porous asphalt using underground storage, so subsurface storage and filtration system that's connected to catch basins. The catch basins are easy to maintain using the same vacuum trucks that they use to clean the gravel filters or the sand filters in the manholes. The cross-section graph here, it looks exactly like the diagram of porous pavement systems, but the project is paved with regular asphalt. So there are storm drains along the road that allow water from the road and surrounding properties into the underground system. So the asphalt is not porous, just the underground is made like a porous system. So there is also a pipe where the water, where the water can be discharged into a small tributary of the Berry Brook. All the homeowners on that street were approached to discuss the project and make sure there were no objections or concerns. Dr. Ballestero actually said that they were worried about basement flooding. They were worried that trying to encourage the infiltration into the water table might backfire and back up into people's basements. But so far, he crossed his fingers, but so far, they have not had any reports of this happening for anyone. Just a couple other pictures just to see that they kind of expanded the roads just to install these drains so that the water can go into the underground system. And here is where the water gets discharged into a little tributary. Excuse me. Now we're going to travel to the city of Durham and the University of New Hampshire.
Jolyne?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just a heads up. We are at 10:40 and there are a couple of questions in the chat box. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay, my timer actually threw me off. I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go quick then. Bioretention systems are basically filter strips in parking lots, and they have proven to be high quality for water quality treatment for pollutant removal. So again, he said that even if these systems are undersized, they still perform at a higher rate that is expected. So his point is that retrofitting around existing development is not easy but you can use the space that you have and it is worth it. These are relatively low maintenance. They just basically need some, there are some sediment traps that need to be emptied once in a while, and maybe some weeding. And they have some public signage everywhere for public education. So porous asphalt, I'll try to go through this very quickly then. There are several porous asphalt projects in the city of Durham. The projects are restricted to parking lots only. There is an underground structure for water storage to allow the infiltration and a sand filter for water treatment, the same concept as the subsurface gravel filters. There is an under drain to evacuate excess water to the storm sewer. The water quality treatment of the porous asphalt has proven effective to remove the same things as the other gravel filters. Porous asphalt actually reduces the need for road salts that have a negative impact on freshwater streams because salt is not effective on porous pavement. The texture of porous pavement is much coarser than regular asphalt and has better traction in the winter. If the parking lot is exposed to sun, plowing can be sufficient. If more de-icing is needed, a natural liquid de-icer should be used, such as liquid sugar beet sugar. The disadvantage of these parking lots is that the installation costs and maintenance are very high. The cost is approximately $2,000 per parking space, and the maintenance requires a vacuum truck, like the road sweeping trucks, except vacuum, to clear the fine particles in the pores before it clogs. Vacuuming should be done 2 to 4 times per year. An experiment at the university showed that the system becomes like regular asphalt only after 3 years without maintenance. So there are several projects like this in Durham because they have companies there that have the appropriate trucks that can be hired to do this maintenance. Permeable interlocking concrete is the exact same as porous pavement, except that these much lower cost and the actual blocks are not porous. It's the interstitial spaces between the blocks that are porous. So there's this fine gravel in between the blocks that let the water in. Same thing, they need to be vacuumed and power needs to be adjusted as to not aspirate the gravel and just aspirate the fine particles. But maintenance is twice a year instead of 2 to 4 times per year. And the University of New Hampshire, I will just say this quickly, it is a research facility where they study the treatment of different stormwater systems. The site was created with a grant, a $7 million grant in 2007. Additional grants have been received since then to continue to add on new systems, but runoff is captured from a very busy 9-acre university parking lot that has an impervious cover of about 98%. All the water enters the field research site through a distribution box that is equipped with automatic samplers that sample at different intervals of time during a rain event. The distribution box then sends water towards different systems to be treated, and the outflow of these systems enter another little cabin where it is again equipped with automatic samplers that evaluates the performance of each systems. So this site has been used every year by master's students for their thesis. So to conclude, the story of the Berry Brook Watershed, 10 years and 25 low-impact development projects later, it is well on its way to a clean bill of health. As of 2018, the project total costs added to about 1.3 million, 793,000 from grant programs, and about 40% matching funds, 529,000 from the city of Dover. The stormwater controls that have been implemented have reduced the impervious cover in the watershed from 30% to just under 10%. The sampling and modeling efforts have showed that these controls effectively remove 19 tons of sediment, 710 pounds of nitrogen, 127 pounds of phosphorus annually from the stream and drainage area. So there's a quote from a report. Is the nice thing about the Berry Brook is that it's like a demonstration site for a mixture of techniques that we can all build and maintain. We know how they work and in what situation they're good for. Now my highway crews wants to think about what we can do in projects that don't have stormwater in the plan. It's changed our thinking altogether, and that's true in the community as well. People want to know what they can do on their own property. There are tons of resources on the university's website. I will invite you to go check it out and take your time. There is a lot of stuff here. Thank you so much.
Hang on. Thank you, Jolyne, very much for your presentation. I think it was definitely worth the time you put into it. I've got one comment first and then a couple of questions. So the first comment is Agriculture Canada has trialed similar buried anaerobic treatment systems with wood chips rather than gravel in both PEI and northern New Brunswick. So you might want to check that out sometime and see what we can find about that, just to see what's happening around us. And then I have the first question I have is, how many years did they do the comparison of grass versus planted? Over time, will grass structures lose the efficiency?
Very good question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. I guess we have to keep looking for some new data as it comes in to see the long-term studies from the university. I don't know.
And then the second question is, does interconnectedness or relative size of lids improve infiltration capacity? I'm just thinking about highly developed areas where these could be implemented in a relatively isolated way. Are certain types of lid better for smaller isolated projects?
I'm sure there are. I mean, I'm not the engineer on these projects, but again, I think I would invite you to go and do some research in the on the websites, the resources provided by the university, and try to look for different projects that were used in different circumstances. The best I can do is present what we were taught, but
okay. Does anybody else have any questions? I think yeah. So if anyone's not aware that we are accepting questions in the chat box, so feel free. I will give you a few minutes here to devise a question and see.
Answering some questions later on throughout the day.
Yeah, and feel free to put in, if you have to think about it a little bit more and then ask a question later. We are available, and Jolyne will be happy to monitor the chat there to answer any questions particular to her presentation.
Absolutely, and also by email after this workshop.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I do have two thank yous. James Thomas says thank you very much, and John Russell says great presentation. Thanks, Jolyne. And Ben at the Cannibal Cases says thanks, Jolyne. And Key Pang says very informative. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, so I think everybody's appreciated this. Thank you so very much for your time, Jolyne.
Thank you. I'll keep looking at the chat so we can move on the agenda. And thank you everyone for your thank yous.
Perfect. Great. So I'm going to pass the floor over to Julie, and she's going to introduce our next speaker. Julie?
Merci beaucoup, Zahira.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jolyne. Very nice presentation. I would like to introduce our second speaker.